All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
And, this is one that I've been looking forward to for a little while because you sent over this episode of Future Dialogues.
Yes.
And AI ethics, man, oh man, that is it's so timely right now.
It's so important.
It really is because I think, we're at this point where AI is becoming so pervasive and it's only going to become more so.
Absolutely.
So really getting into the ethics of it now is kind of setting the stage for how we move forward with this technology.
Well, and one of the things that I think is really fascinating about this particular podcast episode is they really dive deep into the idea that, it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how it's used.
Right.
And the potential consequences of that use.
Absolutely. And one of the things they brought up right away that I thought was really interesting is this whole idea of bias in algorithms.
Yes.
And, they use this example of hiring algorithms.
Yeah. Right.
And it just made me think, if an algorithm is trained on data that already has biases built into it, then it's going to perpetuate those biases.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with AI right now is that a lot of the data sets that are being used to train these algorithms are inherently biased.
Right.
And, they're reflective of the biases that exist in society. So we have to be very careful about how we're using this data.
Yeah. And I think it's not just about, sort of like abstract bias. It's about the real world impact
Exactly.
this could have on people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about loan applications, for example,
Absolutely.
or even just like social media algorithms, the way that information is filtered and presented to us can be shaped by these biases.
Right. And one of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind is that these algorithms are only as good as the data that they're trained on.
Right.
So if we're feeding them biased data, they're going to produce biased results.
And so I think one of the things that this episode kind of hinted at is that, part of the solution to that is having more diverse teams.
Yeah.
Building these algorithms.
Yeah.
Having people from different backgrounds, different perspectives.
Right. Different lived experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Because that can help to kind of identify and mitigate some of those biases.
And I think that's something that's becoming increasingly recognized within the AI community.
Yeah.
The need for greater diversity.
So that was, kind of one ethical dilemma that they dove into. And another one that they talked about was privacy.
Yes.
And I think, this is one that a lot of people are thinking about these days.
It's a big one.
It really is because, we're generating so much data all the time.
All the time.
And, AI thrives on data.
Absolutely.
So there's this tension, right, between using data to fuel innovation, but also protecting individual privacy.
Right. And where do you draw that line?
Exactly. And, one of the things that Future Dialogues kind of put out there was this question of like, how much data am I comfortable sharing to power these systems?
Right. And do I even have a choice in some cases?
Yeah, because it's like, if I want to use this service or this app,
right,
then I have to agree to these terms and conditions.
Right. And those terms and conditions often include giving up a lot of your data.
So that's a really tricky one.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I think we all want to see the benefits of AI.
Of course.
There's so much potential there.
So much potential.
But we also want to protect our privacy.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a real balancing act.
And one of the things that they talked about in this episode is the need for more transparency around how these systems are using our data.
Yeah.
So that we can make informed decisions.
Exactly. And I think that ties into this other big ethical question that they brought up, which is accountability.
Yeah.
And they use this really powerful example of an autonomous vehicle causing an accident.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so who's responsible in that situation?
Right, because if you have a human driver,
right,
and they cause an accident, well, who's at fault?
Right. It's the driver.
Right, but when you have an autonomous vehicle,
yeah,
is it the manufacturer?
Right.
Is it the programmer who wrote the code?
Is it the AI itself somehow?
Right. Is it the person who was in the car but not actually driving?
Yeah. I mean, it just throws this whole wrench into our traditional ideas of blame.
It does.
And it seems like we don't really have clear answers yet.
We don't.
The law hasn't really caught up with the technology.
Right.
So, this is something that we're going to have to figure out.
We are, and we need to figure it out soon.
Yeah.
Because as these systems become more and more autonomous,
right,
the potential consequences of errors or malfunctions become much greater.
And I think that's where this idea of regulation comes in.
Yes.
And I love that they use this analogy of guardrails
Yes.
in the episode because it's not about like stopping innovation.
Right.
It's about making sure that it happens in a safe and responsible way.
Right. And it's about ensuring that the benefits of AI are shared widely.
Right.
And that the potential risks are minimized.
And you know, one thing that they brought up that I thought was really interesting was that, you know, regulation can actually foster innovation
It can.
because it creates a level playing field and it gives companies, you know, a clear set of rules to follow.
Right. And it can also help to build public trust
Right.
in AI.
Exactly. Because if people feel like, you know, there are these guardrails in place,
Right.
then they're more likely to embrace the technology.
Absolutely.
So I think, you know, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about bias, like privacy, accountability, regulation, transparency,
Education.
education. Oh man, you know, it's a lot to think about,
It is.
but it's so important. You know, what I keep coming back to is this idea that AI is not just a technology issue.
Right.
It's a societal issue.
It is.
It's something that affects all of us.
Absolutely.
And I think the more we talk about it, the more we engage with these ethical questions,
Yes.
the better equipped we'll be to shape the future of AI.
Well, and I think the important thing is to recognize that we have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We can choose to be passive consumers of this technology, or we can choose to be active participants in shaping how it's developed and used.
I love that. And I think, you know, as we wrap up here, that's the perfect takeaway for our listeners.
Absolutely.
It's not about being afraid of AI. It's about being informed
Yes.
and engaged,
And asking questions.
asking questions, demanding answers,
Absolutely.
holding those who are developing and deploying AI accountable.
And recognizing that the future of AI is not predetermined. It's something that we're creating together.
Ooh, I like that.
And it's up to all of us to ensure that it's a future that benefits humanity.
That's a beautiful thought to end on.
I think so.
So thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. Hope our listeners found it insightful and engaging.
I did too.
And until next time, keep diving.
Keep diving.